Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
All right, I guess the first thing I should say is Happy New Year, everybody. We are in 2024. You know, another year, another dollar, right? Hopefully it's going to be a good one. The weather definitely has not been very winterish. We just recently had our first snowfall for the season. I'm down in near the shoreline, so we got, I don't know, they said 2 to 3 inches, but it looked like more like an inch and a half. You know, I didn't even break out the snow blower. I just took the shovel out there, and literally 10 minutes I had my entire driveway shoveled. So
well, today it was more in Southburg, it was more like 3 inches, less than 3 inches. It's like they made such a prediction, and the prediction was horribly wrong.
Well, my daughter-in-law lives upstate, you know, above Waterbury area, and they got about 3 inches. So they were on track. Anywho, before I forget, coming up with Milford Photo, I'm going to be doing a talk that some of you have attended in the past. It's called Beyond the Rule of Thirds. This goes into a little bit of the psychology and the mechanics of composition. You know, that kind of breaks away from the normal rule of thirds, where you put that grid in your viewfinder and you put, you know, you have the points of interest, and that's where you put your subject. You know, the running joke with me is whenever I hear somebody says, you know, oh, I broke a rule photographing this, and I look at their photograph, I go, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. All you did was substitute one rule for another rule, you know? But it's because, you know, a lot of people, they're taught the basic rules of composition, the rule of thirds. It's right there. You know, look through your viewfinder. You have that grid already built into your camera, and they go, make art. And most people don't get beyond that, you know, very basic understanding of composition. So I've done it in the past. I just revamped the entire program. I got rid of a lot of the fluff that made it a little bit kind of dry. And I put in a lot more examples that kind of hopefully reinforce the various rules of composition. So if you're interested, it's going to be, you have to sign up through Milford Photo on meetup.com. And it's going to be Tuesday, January 23rd. It's a Zoom session starting at 6:30. So if you want to strengthen up your understanding of composition, you know, feel free to sign up for that. All right. Today is Photoshop. We are going to be talking about something a little bit that I've started noticing more and more photographers doing online, and that's the intentional camera movement. All right, do me a favor, guys, just mute. Somebody's got some noise coming across. Thanks. The intentional camera movement, or ICM, is where you incorporate some kind of blur artistically into your image. And it can be pretty interesting. It's definitely a lot of experimentation. So, you know, I was thinking, well, how can we take that concept but create something in Photoshop? So what I got planned for you today is how to incorporate this motion blur into your photographs that do not have motion blur. Okay, So we're going to start off with something fairly easy. We're going to take it up a notch, make it a little bit more artistic. And then we'll actually do one where we combine a really sharp image with an image that has very intentional camera movement done to it at the time of capture. Okay, so let me go to here. These are the images we're going to be using. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. All right. And this one in particular is our very own Alan. Alan and I and Greg went to Jafrita Park and we photographed some of the foliage. So I want to do something a little artistic with this. As you can see, it's a rather kind of boring image by itself. All I did was basically just document Alan out in nature with his camera, taking a photo of the beautiful colors. So we're going to see if we can, create something artistic out of this. Okay. But we're going to start off something simple. We're going to start off with this particular image. Those of you who are in the Milford area probably recognize this. If you've ever been down to Milford Photo, this is up the street from Milford Photo at what's called the Duck Pond, right behind the library. And this is probably one of the most photographed locations in Milford because it's just such a pretty sight. Whenever I do my beginner photo walk for Milford Photo, we inevitably end up at this spot. So I have a ton of photos of this church with the waterfalls coming off of the pond. Now, in this particular case, as you can see, it was taken in, what was this? Almost about 10:30 in the morning. So the sky was pretty up there. And let's see, let me see if I can metadata. I shot at 1/30th of a second. Okay, so it's 1/30th of a second. So there is a little bit of blur on the waterfall, but nothing that would create that very dramatic waterfall. Okay, so you know that in order to capture that nice, very soft falling water on a waterfall, you need a very long exposure, something that is going to allow a lot of time to go through for the water to cascade down. But when you're shooting in bright sun, in order to get that kind of long exposure, you need something to cut out the light. So you would normally use some kind of ND filter. Well, I didn't happen to have an ND filter at the time. And to be honest, it was a beginner's workshop, so we weren't even discussing ND filters. It was more about, just framing and figuring out your exposure, to try to get a fairly decent waterfall photo. And you can see it's a fairly decent one, but it lacks that wow factor that would get with a long exposure. So the nice thing about this is that we can use Photoshop to kind of simulate that long exposure look. Okay, so we're going to do that. And then, like I said, we're going to do something a little bit artistic with this one. And then the last one I have is these two images here. I got these at the park right around the corner from me. It's a veterans memorial, and it's basically a large bronze eagle. And what I did is I took a static shot of the eagle, and then I took one where I racked the zoom lens in order to get that zoom effect on that second image. So the second image is definitely a intentional camera movement. I don't even remember what I had let's see. My shutter speed on that one was 1/6 of a second. 1/6 of a second. All right. So it's slow enough for me to be able to just take the lens and rack it, my zoom lens, and it gives you that kind of like zoom blur effect. Okay. So we're going to take that and we're going, dust spots. And we're going to do a little bit of compositional manipulation with this one where I've captured the eagle, by itself in order to create something a little bit more artistic. So that's what we're going to concentrate on today, okay? All right. So just to save time, I've already opened up Photoshop. Excuse me. And loaded some of these images. So we're going to start off very simple with this one with the church and the waterfall in the foreground. Okay, so if you have a bunch of waterfall images in your library and you say, if I only had brought an ND filter, well, here's your chance to salvage them. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is create a duplicate layer, all right? And Control J or Command J is a very simple way of duplicating that layer, okay? Excuse me. And this is the reason I'm duplicating is because the effect that I'm going to be applying is a destructive effect. So one of the things that, we have to be careful when we do any kind of editing as Photoshop is be able to have voice, for the most part, the ability to modify the steps as we go along and to work as non-destructively as possible. I'm going to show you, this is going to be a destructive way, but I'll talk to you about being able to do it in a non-destructive way. I believe, I haven't tested it, but I believe it could be done non-destructively with smart objects. But for the most part, I find that I don't need to work non-destructively with this particular effect, simply because it really, once you apply the blur effect, it's not like you need to change that blur effect. All right. And I'll show you what I mean. You'll see what I mean. All right. So what I want to do is I want to create some kind of blur on the water so that it makes it look like it was shot with a longer exposure. All right. Now you can see that the shutter, while it wasn't very slow, it was slow enough in order to really drag out some of these water droplets to create that, softer cascading effect. All right, so we have a little bit of an impression of what we want to do. We just want to take it to that next level. All right, and the way we're going to do that is we are going to apply a blur. So if we go up to our, hold on a second, where is my, give me a second. There we go. My spot, there we go. If we go up to filter, all right, we're going to have a bunch of filters that are available to us. All right. And the one thing you'll notice is that you have several blur filters. All right. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that the layer that I copied, make sure that is selected. Okay. We're going to go to filter. And if you look, you're going to see that there are two blurs, a blur and a blur gallery. So if we go to blur, we're going to get, that this is where you would pick up your like Gaussian blur. Okay. And that's probably one of the more common ones. But what Gaussian blur does is it blurs from the center of the pixel outward radially on each pixel. All right. So that it creates a very even distribution of blur. What we want is a more linear version of blur, all right? And if we look down here, we have a motion blur, all right? So if we take motion blur, we can tell it, what direction we want that blur and what the distance is we want that blur, okay? And if we look at the waterfall, it's definitely coming up and down. So we want that direction to be up and down. But there's one inherent problem with this particular blur effect, is that it takes the pixels and kind of stretches them out as a blur. So what happens is, as it gets further away from the pixel it's blurring, it gets dimmer and dimmer. So what happens is that we get in order to get any kind of blur, we have to really up the value. And what happens is that we get this streaky effect that looks very artificial. All right. It looks very artificial, not quite that cascading look. Okay. So in a pinch, you can probably use this, but I find that this particular technique is not the best solution for this effect. All right. So while, you may think, oh, well, I just got to, streak the water going down, this is a great tool that does exactly what it needs to do. It's not quite the most appropriate. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. I just wanted to show you how that works, because the other thing is, in order to get any kind of blur, you really have to crank up that blur dial a lot. And then what happens is, when we go out of the bounds, so for example, we need to keep our blur within the bounds of the waterfall. Okay. As it goes near this upper ledge here, all right, it gets kind of wonky. And you get like an overspill. Okay, and I'll show you a better version of the overspill in the next example, but this is something that we want to avoid. We want to kind of avoid that ghosting or that overspill onto areas where we don't want. All right, so what do we have available? Well, if we go to filter blur gallery, the blur gallery, we have some other tools: field blur, iris blur, tilt shift, path, and spin. And what we want is the path. All right. And what we're going to do is we are going to instruct Photoshop to follow a very specific path. Okay. And in this particular case, the path is a downward path. All right. So by default, it's going to give you this arrow. and the arrow gives you your vector direction. All right, you can see the how it's pointing from left to right. If we go to those larger circles on the ends, we can move those around. So what I want to do is I want to place that at the top of the waterfall on one section there, and take the other point and bring it down following the line of descent of the waterfall. Okay. Let me see if I can zoom in here a little bit. All right, I don't know if you can, hopefully you can see that blue arrow. It basically just goes down like that. It's got a circle on one end and a circle on the other end, and you just manipulate them. Okay. The nice thing about this is we can make additional manipulations, but for now, what we want is just, we want that downward path. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place another one on the other end of the waterfall, just in case the angle happens to be a little bit different because of perspective. Okay. And I'm going to make one more because down here at the bottom, let me turn off the visibility. Down here at the bottom, we can see that the direction of the waterfall comes down, but I also have a bit of the stream, and this bit of the stream is going at a different angle. Okay, so the nice thing about this particular tool is we can place arrows to indicate a shift in direction of our blur effect. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create another arrow, and I'm going to go from where the waterfall drops down and then along that little creek bed. Okay, and you can see that we get a little bit of a warp in the direction. Okay, so we need to fix that a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that previous arrow that I placed, and I'm just going to bring that arrow down a little bit further. All right, and see if I can correct for that. All right, and maybe even place another arrow there. Okay, and I can even place another arrow here. All right, and now you can see that I've corrected for that warping effect of the waterfall. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. Okay, now the thing you have to realize is that I only want to concentrate on what the water is doing. All right, because I'm going to be combining this with the underlying image that has no blur attached to it. All right, so I'm going to bring back those rocks. Okay, so my concern is I just want the water to look pretty good. Okay, so I have my directional arrows, and over on the right hand side in my toolbox, okay, you're going to see here it is, path blur, and there's going to be some adjustments that you can make. All right, and for the most part, I don't need to worry about any of all these other ones. I just need the speed. All right, because as you know, when something whizzes by you faster, it's going to blur more than when it's going slower. So increasing the speed value is going to increase the value of that water falling down. And if you notice, if you recall back to the previous example with the motion blur, you can see the quality of the blur here is a lot more natural looking. All right, because we don't have a lot of that motion that motion blur artifacting that the other tool has. This one does a very nice job at creating a more natural looking effect. Okay. All right. So once we get it looking the way we want, and of course, if we look at the upper part of the image, the upper part, looks completely gross, but disregard that. All right. Whenever you do any kind of local adjustments, just concentrate on the part that you are looking to manipulate. Okay. Once you get that effect of the water blur coming down, go ahead and sit okay. All right. And I have it here. It's about 160%. All right. So I pushed it quite a bit. Okay. And this is one of those where it's salt and pepper to taste. Okay. How much do you want?
Yeah.
Yes.
What does taper do?
Taper kind of controls the starting point. If you notice that the effect becomes less at the starting point. All right.
Okay.
As I bring that slider up. Okay. And the ending point. So the more you increase it, the more it's going to look more like that previous filter, the motion blur filter. All right. So you can play around with it, or for artistic effect. But I find for doing the waterfall, I don't want it to look all that streaky. Because if you've ever done it, in real life with a neutral density filter, it's not completely really streaky unless you leave your shutter like really extended. Okay. That's when it becomes that really, really soft, really kind of streaky look. Okay. But if you want something that looks a little bit more natural with that long exposure, I usually keep that taper down or even off. Okay. The strobe effect does a really weird. It's as if you took multiple shots with a strobe, so you tend to see kind of like little skips in the progression of that blur, and it's just it gives a really funky, weird texture that I don't like. So I kind of avoid that strobe stuff down here. I leave it, leave it off. Okay. All right. Once you get it looking the way you want, you just hit OK. Give it a second to apply the filter, and there we go. All right. Now we need to apply it to the part of the image that we want to apply it to. Okay. And this is where a mask is going to come into play. Okay. But what I want a reverse mask. So what I want to do is I want to hide this entire effect so that I can just paint in the effect. And the way we do that is to create a black mask. So you know that if you press the mask button by itself, it's going to give you by default a white mask. We want a black mask. So the Alt, you press and hold the Alt or Option key. So basically you're asking Photoshop to give you an alternate version of that mask. All right. Or you want the other option for you Mac people, the other option of that mask. All right. So press and hold, click on the mask, and we get a black mask. And then from here, you should know how it goes. We take a nice soft round brush. Okay. And with white, all right, make sure that white is your foreground color. Okay. We are going to go ahead and paint in that effect. Okay. All right. But we need to be a little bit careful on how we paint that in. Okay. We can't just go willy-nilly. All right. So let me go ahead and zoom in here a little bit. All right. I'm going to size down. All right. And what I want to do is I just want to paint on the area of the waterfall that has the water coming down. All right. So what I want to do is I want to avoid the rocks down at the bottom. Okay. And I want to avoid these areas here in between the water where some of that, the wall of the waterfall is showing through. All right. Because it makes no sense to blur those, correct? So I want to avoid those. And I'm just basically just applying my mask just where the water is. All right, maybe over these rocks here. Okay, move it over. Size your brush if you need to. A little bit more down at the end here. And if you go a little bit too far, remember, just hit the X to toggle to black, and you can paint back what you messed up on. Okay. All right, we're not finished yet. We're not finished yet. Okay. Got my water looking good. All right, the water that's coming down onto the stream, remember we changed our arrow, okay, in order to look at that. And now it flows with the path of the stream, right? Okay. Let me zoom out a little bit here. Oh, Control plus. Okay, so that's our blur effect, but what we've done now at this point is we've supplanted the original image with the blur image. And it looks a little on the fake side, especially if you start, kind of zooming into areas. All right. So what we want to do is we want to blend that with the underlying layer. And for that, we're going to use a blend mode. Okay. Yeah.
Before you got along the rocks on the bottom, it looks like there's shadowing.
Yes, there is.
So is that caused by the blurring effect?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. All right, we're going to kind of get rid of that a little bit, okay? But there are ways to get rid of this, and I'll show you that in a minute, all right? So what I want to do is I want to apply a blend effect to our layer. So we're going to go over to the side here, to our blend modes. And we're going to come down to, see, overlay, soft light, overlay. Ooh, maybe screen. Screen looks pretty good. Okay. So the screen mode, what that does, it says, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to blend everything from middle gray to white, with the underlying image. And everything from middle gray to black is going to kind of turn invisible. All right. So we're basically just preserving the majority of the pixels from middle gray to white, and having it, blend in. So all these areas all these areas of darkness, okay, and between here, now start coming back through, giving us a more realistic blend than if we were just to do a normal one, okay? So if we look at those spaces in between, the dark spaces, you can see how they are blurred, because if you remember, we blurred the entire image, light pixels as well as dark pixels, okay? And obviously we want the areas where it's the dark pixels, that's where the water is thinnest in this waterfall, that allows us to see a little bit through that veil of water to that wall behind it, okay? So I want some of that texture to come through, all right? That's why changing the blend mode, okay? And the nice thing about it is that, you know, it kind of brightens up the waterfall a little bit, okay? Which we can manipulate and tone down if we need to. But you can see even with that, it just brings the balance between the brightness of the church and the brightness of the waterfall has now balanced out a little bit more. Whereas previously, the church is in bright sun. The waterfall is kind of like, you know, a little bit in shadow. It's getting kind of more of a cross light to it. So it's not receiving the full light that the church is. So the church is a lot brighter than the waterfall. By adding this blend mode, it brightens up that waterfall and makes it a little bit more balanced as far as the exposure goes. Okay. And then from here on, you can do, you know, whatever other edits you want. Okay. But if you notice that halo effect has kind of disappeared because it's blended in with the underlying pixels. Okay. Any questions on this? Very, very, very simple effect. But you can see that it really, really does a fantastic job. And if you want, you can even take that and duplicate it, okay? And it's going to give you a little bit more of that softer blur. However, when you start really doubling up on these layers, now you're going to have to go in and kind of work on having it, there we go, having it just tone down that white a little bit. Okay. So, you know, so be careful. All right. Maybe even add another one. There we go. Okay. All right, so let me group that. Okay, so that way we can see before and after. And it really, really replicates, you know, that look of having put an ND filter on your photograph for capturing a waterfall. Okay. Any questions? We're good? Okay. All right. Where are we? Where is my light? Okay, here we go. Next one here is this one. All right. All right, give me 1 second. Let me just get something real quick to drink here. I can feel my voice going on me. All right, get myself a little water. Okay, so for this particular image, we're going to do a little something different. We're going to go outside of the realm of reality and really play around with that motion blur, the path blur tool. Okay, the path blur tool. So what do I want to do? Okay. Obviously, you want to have some kind of direction that you want to take your image in, right? And I really do encourage you guys to experiment, okay? But even with experimentation, you should have kind of a small clue as to what you initially want to do, okay? All right, so I actually got inspiration for this from seeing some of the images that I've been noticing on social media with that with that motion blur. And the majority of the ones that I saw that looked really, really great were, you know, these beach shots, and where they really blur out the beach, blur out the sky, but they leave the subject kind of alone. Okay. Well, I didn't really have a beach shot handy with me, so I said, well, what else can we do? So I came across this image and I go, oh, there we go. We'll do a little something creative with Alan here. All right. So what do I want to do? Well, we have a horizon line here that makes for a natural division. Okay. From this horizon line, we have the lower part is grass. And as you know, grass has a lot of texture with the blades of grass going up and down. But if you ever notice the way light hits grass, it's more dependent on the underlying surface structure than the grass itself. So if there's any kind of hills or rolling or depressions in the grass, as the light hits it, it tends to create shadows more on the topography of the land than on the actual blades of grass. And you can see a little bit of that here, where we have, you know, these patches of dark and patches of light. And everything's kind of going in this general left and right direction. Okay? So because it's going horizontally across, I figure from that tree line down, I'm going to blur it horizontally. All right? Now, the tree line going up, on the other hand, well, these are trees, and for the most part, trees go up and down. Although with all the leaves present here, we're not really seeing a lot of the tree trunk structure. We have a little bit of it here, some of it here, some of it here, right? But for the most part, trees, we understand trees as being up and down. So my idea is to create the blur that goes up and down for the tree part, okay? So we're going to go up and down here, and we're going to go left and right on the grass, but we want to isolate the subject from everything behind it, okay? So that means we're going to need how many images or how many copies of this image? Well, we need one for Alan, we need one for the grass, and we need one for the trees, all right? So we need three instances of this image, okay? All right, so let's go over to Photoshop, and I happen to have him right here. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is isolate Alan from the first image, Okay. Now I want to do that first off because if actually here, let me replicate it. I'm going to do it with that motion blur filter because I think that kind of gives you the best idea. Okay, motion blur. Okay, we're going to go left and right. Okay. Whenever we put any kind of blur on an image, it's going to put a blur on all the pixels of that image, okay, including our buddy Alan here. Okay, so everywhere you see where Alan was standing, he's been blurred out, and all the edges have now pushed left and right. Okay, so what happens is if we were to cut him out and not create a blank layer underneath him, it's going to create this really crazy halo. All right. And this is what you were implying earlier or in the previous image, Bill. All right. Where things that should be stationary, if the underlying layer blurs it, it's going to create that halo effect. Okay. So we don't want that halo effect. Let me dump that. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is we need to isolate Alan from the background. Okay. So I'm going to make a copy, Control J or Option J. Excuse me. And I am going to go ahead and click on my select subject. All right. You can also, if you have the context bar, you can select subject. Okay. And if you kind of hover over, you can kind of see that it does a fairly decent job. Okay. But it might leave some holidays. So what I want to do is I want to create a marquee around everything here. And I want to specifically tell Photoshop, this is what I consider to be the subject. All right. And this is what I want you to work on to isolate. Okay. So as soon as I let go, it's going to do its thing. And you can see that it kind of sort of, didn't do a very good job. All right. So let me see if I can add to it. Okay. All right. To add, you got to make sure that the little add icon is clicked. Otherwise, it's going to replace your selection. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here and I'm just going to make sure that whatever it missed, I'm going to go ahead and just add it as I need. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. Okay. And then I'm going to switch over to just my regular lasso tool. Just my regular lasso. Okay. All right. And still make sure that you have the add. All right. Any little bits here, I'm just going to make sure that it gets added. And I'm just going to use the regular lasso tool. Because using the AI at this stage, I don't want it undoing something previously. All right. What I want to do is I just want to take and add whatever the AI missed. All right. And you can see it did a really decent job. So it's not like I have to add too much. All right. But I suggest spending a little bit of time here. The better your selection, the better your mask. Okay. All right. You can see that here it kind of missed a few spots. So I'm just going to go here. Missed a few little spots there. All right. All around the camera. All right. All right. I'm not going to spend too much time. It actually did a really good job. All right. Here in between the shoelaces, it missed a spot. Okay. So you can see by default, I am in the add to. All right. Here, what I want to do is I want it to subtract from. So I can either come up here, all right, and click on the subtract, or what I find what's better is just press and hold the Alt key, and that temporarily switches the state from add to subtract, all right, and you'll see the plus symbol turn to a negative symbol, all right, and now I can just go in here and subtract that little area from the mask, all right. Oh, I need to add a little bit here. That looks good. That looks good. Oh, there we go. Okay. Needs a little work on the tripod legs, but for this demonstration, I'm not going to go too crazy. Okay. Now you have two options. Okay. You can work destructively and just do a Control J. It's going to duplicate this to its own layer, and it's going to remove the background, or you can just add a mask. Okay. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and add a mask. And if we hide the underlying layer, you can see that Alan is all by himself in the void. He went into the matrix. Okay. All right. So why do I want to do this first? Well, now that I have a mask, I have a way of creating a selection based on that mask. So at any point, I can come to the mask, and if I press and hold the Control key or the Command key, and I click on that mask, I regain my marching ants for that selection. Okay? Which is what we want. Okay? All right, so Control D removes it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my original layer. All right, I'm going to hide the one above it. And what I want to do is I want to do Control J, Command J, all right, to create a copy. All right. And from here, this is where we're going to use for our blur effect. So we need to get rid of Alan from this particular view. So how do we do that? I use the Control click on my mask to bring back the marching ants. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a content aware fill. All right. But we need to do something first. So right now, that mask follows the edge of Alan really closely. All right. In order to have an effective content aware, that mask needs to have some of the background on the outside of our subject in order to understand that it needs to sample from the outlying area in order to fill in. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our selection, select, modify, okay, and expand. All right, so we'll go to our select, modify, expand, all right, and we get this dialog box, and we want to expand it, I don't know, let's go 12 pixels, okay, and hit OK. And you'll notice that now that mask that the marching ants that we have around Alan have now encroached onto our background. Okay. So from here, we can go edit. Where's the content aware fill? Click on that, give it a second. All right. It's going to say, okay, we're going to select from all the areas around it. It gives us our preview here. And I don't care the quality of this particular step because we're going to be blurring it anyway. As long as we have no vestiges of Alan, Alan be gone. All right, because we don't want any of the dark pixels of the camera, his clothing, the blue of the shirt, the white of his bag, influencing that blur. Okay, so we're gonna hit OK. All right, get rid of the marching ants. As you can see, I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's a halo. There's a ghost image of Alan. But like I said, I don't care at this point. Okay. All right. We have one. All right. That's going to be for our grass area. We're going to need a second one for the tree area. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. Control J. All right. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to label this grass. All right, and label this one trees. All right. I still have Alan here turned off. Okay. But I can bring him back later and you'll see what I mean. Okay. All right. So we're going to hide the trees and just have our grass. Okay. And that bottom layer, you can turn it off if you want, but it doesn't matter. All right. We're going to go to our filter, blur gallery, path blur, just like we did previously. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and place our arrow horizontally across. All right. And then just play around with the speed slider, to get whatever effect you want. And in this case, I want it to be very definitive, kind of very, very streaky. So I'm going to have, a good amount of blur on this. All right. Let's see. That's about 270%. Looks good to me. Okay. Hit OK or hit the return key. The OK is right here at the top. Okay. And what that does is it commits that effect. It commits the effect to the image. Okay. All right. I'm going to go up to the layer above it that says trees. I'm going to make that visible. We're going to do the exact same thing. Filter, blur gallery, path blur, but this time we're going to take our arrow, our default arrow that is left and right, and I'm just going to switch it to go up and down. Okay. And again, play around with that speed blur until you get an effect that you want. All right. So for this one, this one's going to be a little bit of an artistic decision here. The previous layer with the grass, there's not a lot of texture in the grass that's visible from this distance and at this focal length. Okay. So what conveys that it is grass is pretty much the color. All right. So I can get away with pushing the blur a little bit more on the lower part. For the trees, though, I want it to read a little bit like it's trees. Okay, I want people to know that these are trees. So I don't want to completely destroy the notion of treeness. Okay, if that makes sense. All right. So if I go to that 270, it kind of just, it's a little bit too much blur, and it just now becomes just these shapes of color that may or may not be trees. Okay, so I'm going to back this off a little bit until we get more of that sense of trees. All right, and it's looking like about 160 gets me to that point. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK and commit that to the image. Okay. All right, and of course, we still have our top image with Alan. All right. Okay, so now I need to retain the trees, but bring the underlying ground into view. How do we do that? With a mask. All right, nice big soft round brush. Black as our foreground color. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just size this up. Let me back this up. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint out the bottom section. Okay, and if it's gone a little bit too far, all right, let me make my brush a little bit smaller. Hit the letter X to bring black as my foreground color. Oops, I'm sorry, white as my foreground color. And I'm just going to bring that back there. Okay. And now we have a blur that goes in two directions, horizontally on the bottom and vertically at the top. All right. So now we need to bring our buddy in. Yay. Okay. But if we zoom in, all right, we zoom in. Actually, wow, it did a really, really great job with that mask. Okay. But if we want to, let me just go to the mask, brush. All right, I'm just going to go ahead, X, black, and I'm just going to touch up these bottoms a little bit. Okay, all right. And now, if we go to the Properties tab, okay, and open up our properties, we can take the feather of that mask, all right, and we can apply a little bit of a feather, all right, and that's just going to kind of soften that edge a little bit, okay? So that's a quick way of doing it. The other way you can do it, all right, let me bring that back to 0. The other way is if you double click on the mask, it's going to bring you to the mask properties, and you're going to have that ability plus a few other tools available to you here. Okay. So we can take that feather here. All right. You got to be careful because this feathering is a little bit different. All right. It's going to start haloing. And usually whenever I apply a little feather with this particular tool, I also give a little bit of contrast just to tighten it up. All right. And what that does is it really, really cleans up your edge. Oops. There we go. Okay. And look how beautiful Alan is there. Okay. Hit OK. Bring it back out. And we have Alan in this very surreal moment. Okay. But you know what? I say let's do something a little bit more creative here. Okay. Since we got so much blur going on, let's add a little bit of blur to our buddy Alan. All right. So that way he kind of just blends in with his environment a little bit. Now you can stop it here. All right. It's if you look at a lot of the examples on Facebook, you're going to see that a lot of them pretty much look like this. This is pretty much where they stop. because it really brings your subject forward in its environment. You can still tell what the environment is, but it really makes your subject pop, okay? But I want to take it up a notch. So what I want to do is I'm going to create another layer, but in this particular layer, I only want Alan. I don't want anything else. So what do I need? I need to make a selection of Alan first. Well, we happen to have that mask handy. Control, Command, click on your mask. It gives you the marching ants. Remember that. It's a great little tip to keep in mind. Okay. Once I have my marching ants, make sure that the layer that you want to duplicate is selected. All right. And because I don't want the background, all right, I'm just going to do a Control J. Control J. And what that does is it gives me Alan in the void. Okay, Alan in the void. All right. Okay. So for this next part, in order to kind of show you what I'm talking about, I'm going to isolate him temporarily. Now, when you do this effect, you don't need to do this step. This is just to kind of show you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a solid color layer. We'll make it, it doesn't have to be bright white. And I'm going to put it directly behind. Okay. Now the reason I'm doing this is pretty much just so that you can see the effect that I want to do with this. All right. Now, I'm going to go ahead and select my Alan layer. Let's call this Alan blur, right? Blur effects. Okay. All right. The Alan blur effect. Okay. And what I'm visualizing is kind of like a trail behind that just kind of flows off the edge of the image. All right. So if we were to take the top of his head, all right, and the bottom of his foot, all right, and just trail it off, and it just kind of disappears into towards the edge. Okay. But what I want to do is I want to pick up some of the color of the hat, the jacket, the pants, the sneakers. I want to pick up those colors. Okay. And I want to create a color streak. All right. So we can't really use a blur effect. If I use a blur effect, you notice that the edges tend to kind of blur out and become transparent. Okay. I'll show you what I mean. If we go to, for example, blur, what was it? Motion blur. Okay. Even if the more I push it, the more transparent Alan becomes. All right. So he's now disappearing. Well, we can use this effect, for what it is, but I want a little bit more impact. Okay. And actually, if we take this and we just double it up, we get some of that opacity back. All right. But it's still, it's still a little wonky. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. All right. I'm going to go ahead and zoom into our Mr. Allen. All right. And what I want to do at this point is I want to use my quick selection. Do I want to use quick selection? Oh no, you know what? There's a couple ways you can do this. I'll do it. I'll do it an easy way. Okay. I'm gonna recreate my selection tool. All right. So press and hold the control key. go back to your mask that selects Alan, right? And I now have the marching ants around him, okay? So now what I want to do is I want to remove a certain amount of this mask from him, all right? And I'm going to do it very selectively, okay? So what I want to do first is go up to my toolbar, and I'm going to click on subtract, okay? So that everything I do is going to subtract from the current mask, okay? And what I want to do is I want to keep some of the blue, some of the white, some of the gray, some of the black, some of the white, some of the blue. All right, you get the point, right? Okay. So what I want to do is I want to subtract everything but that kind of like that leading edge. All right. So what I'm going to do is starting from the top of his hat. All right. I want to retain the very top part of his hat. I'm just going to come in here, and it doesn't have to be exact. All right. But I'm going to just basically keep some of those pixels on the edge. All right. Now hopefully you can let me zoom in here so you can see what I'm doing. All right. I'm basically just following a little bit inwards and removing. All right. You see that? Okay. So basically everything that's left, all right, let me get rid of this leg. Everything that's left is just the trailing pixels. Okay. All right. And this is just for the effect. All right. Now, all I have selected is that the trailing side of Alan. All right. So what I need to do is I need to now take those pixels and stretch them out to the end. So for this, I'm just going to press and hold my Control Alt keys. All right. Press and hold them for the whole entire process. Okay. And I'm going to use the arrow key. And if you just hold the arrow key, you can see that it kind of starts stretching it out pixel wise. Right. And then just keep going until it goes off the edge of your page. All right. So as long as you press and hold the Control Alt or Command Option key, okay, that should do it. And Control D to deselect. And I now have this streak of color going in behind Alan, right? Okay, so now let me bring that up. Okay, all right. I used the gray to show you exactly what the effect does. All right, it isolates it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just turn that off. And this is kind of what it looks like. But right now, what we just did is on top of everything else. I want to put that underneath the previous layer of Alan. So this is Alan here. All right. And this is the Alan effect. Actually, let me get rid of that. Okay. So I want to bring it underneath. All right. And what that does is it puts Alan in the forefront. Okay. So you can see Alan, and then right behind Alan is this streak. Okay. And we have a little holiday there. If you want, you know, we can just get our clone stamp tool, click, and paint it in if you want. There we go. All right. And now what I want to do is I want to apply some fading, because right now this by itself, it looks a little too gimmicky. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and place a mask. All right. And what I want to do is, let me zoom in. Just right behind Alan, I want to give a little bit of a separation. Okay. So on the mask, I'm going to get my brush. Nice, soft brush, right? Round brush. Okay. Black as my foreground color. What I want to do is I just want to paint in a little separation. All right. Little separation. So it kind of starts giving him a little bit of a glow, because that's the grass coming in visible behind. And I'm just a little bit. Okay. All right. And that little triangle, I switch back away, and we can bring that back in if we want to, and give a little separation there. There we go. All right. So we have a little separation, and now I want it fading off to the, off the page. Okay. So for this, I'm going to take a gradient. All right. A gradient. All right. So we click on the gradient, and we want to make sure that we are foreground to transparent. Foreground to transparent. Okay. And what that's going to do is, it's because I have black selected as my foreground color. It's going to apply black, but it's going to fade it off to nothing. All right. So what I want to do is out here, I want to start out here, and I'm going to bring my gradient in this direction. All right. And have it fade off from the edge. Okay. So gradient, click, and drag it in. All right. And it creates this, the line with the two little ends. And if you want, you can angle it. You can move this around as needed. All right. So maybe I'll give a little bit more of a blur. The center diamond here, the center diamond, that kind of controls where the midpoint of your fade is. Okay. But in the middle is fine. Okay. I'll bring it in just a little bit. And oops, that's it. Okay. Control 0, zoom out. And there we have our Mr. Allen. All right. And if it's too much, we can always take the opacity, and we can bring the opacity down a little bit. 75%. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay. And the nice thing is, because it's a mask, we can manipulate the mask around it. If we want a little more halo, a little less halo. If we want more fade, we want less fade. Okay. And what's nice is it picks up all the colors that are adjacent from Alan's clothing, and makes it, it stretches it out. Okay. Any questions on this technique?
Very cool. I've never seen that before, and I'm glad it's recorded, because I had to go over it a couple of times, step by step. There's a lot there, but the end result, that's very cool.
Yeah, once you do it a couple times, you're going to realize how super, super easy this really is. All right. Obviously, I'm explaining all the steps, so it kind of drags a little bit. But the whole entire process, you can put, kick these out pretty easily. The hardest part is figuring out which image to apply this effect for. Okay. And this is where the experimentation is going to come into play. All right. I find that backgrounds that are fairly evenly distributed work best. So in this case, we have a field of green, underneath. So that lends itself to that, horizontal blur. And then we have a field of trees. It wouldn't look as nice if there were, other things in the way there. All right. And I'm going to show you kind of sort of what I mean by that in the next example. Okay. Because we're going to take what we've learned here and we're going to just kick it up a notch.
Hey, Doc,
Yes.
before you leave this picture, and not to do any of this, but when you first put this up, and maybe it's because of something I was watching recently, but the idea came to me, instead of Alan taking a picture, maybe Alan is just sort of painting the landscape in front of him. So some way make it as though the fading comes out of his camera. And he's sort of,
Oh, yeah.
landscape, and the grass is already there. I was watching Good Omens the other night, and
Oh, yeah.
it's just like, hey, there's Alan painting trees.
Oh, there you go. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, experiment. Let your imagination go wild. See what you can do. Okay.
Especially that thought came to me when I first saw the picture. I go, man, that'd be too hard. And then you showed us that past stuff, and I go, oh, we can do this.
Yeah. Well, the next example is going to take this and bring it up a notch. So hopefully it'll show you another little trick that you can incorporate that will hopefully make it a little bit better to getting that results that's in your head. Okay. All right. Any further questions on this one? We're good? Okay. All right. So we're going to be using Alan from this image for our next image. Okay. The next image, all right, is the same area. Okay. This is actually to the left of where Alan was standing earlier. Okay. Still looking in the same direction. All right. If we were to extend this all the way to the right a little bit more, that's where Alan would be. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to get a little bit funkier with the blur manipulation. All right. Now, the thing about this particular image, actually, let me go ahead and group this, Control G, before, after. All right. If you notice the background on this image, it's flat to the camera. That's why it's very ideal for this technique. All right, because we have these purposeful areas of colors, of textures, of pattern, okay, going on. These just solid block of green, solid block of trees. All right, makes it very easy. This one is a little bit more complex. While technically we can still break it down along that horizon to the trees above and the grass below, we have other elements at play, including the fact that we're no longer straight on to our horizon. We are angled to our horizon. So now we have this vanishing point of line here that just kind of disappears this way, right? Crazy crooked angle of an arrow, right? On top of that, we have an object that interrupts that wall of trees, okay? And we have a waterfall that interrupts that block of grass, okay? So where our previous one, it was simple, you know, we had trees above, grass below. This one now has items or elements that break into those silhouettes, all right? So it presents a little bit of a challenge. So what do I want to do? Well, I want to do the exact same thing that I did previously, where I blur the trees in one direction and the grass in another direction. Okay? All right. But because we have the pump house and we have the waterfall, we need to consider that. So what do I want to do? Well, I have an idea that I might want to leave the pump house alone. But the waterfall, I might want to blur, you know, along the path of the fall of water, kind of like we did in the first example, okay? So we have a lot going on. So what do we need? Well, we need one for the trees, one for the grass, one for the waterfall, okay? All right. And how should I word it? How critical is it to preserve the pump house against the background? All right. Because what I'm thinking is, if we were to take, well, there's two little people here, all right, that are insignificant to the image. All right. And more than likely, as I apply the blur, they're going to get blurred out anyway, or I might just clone them out. Okay. But I'm thinking, if I place Alan here with his camera as if he's taking a photo of the scene, all right, that might work. Okay. So now what happens is my point of focus is no longer the pump house. It's going to be Alan, which I'm going to be placing in after the fact. Okay. As a matter of fact, just to make it a little bit easier for you guys to visualize, I'm going to go ahead and grab this layer. So I'm going to go Control, copy. I'm going to come here and Control paste. Okay. And I'm thinking, if we put Alan right there, right? That's my composition. All right. So now I don't care if the pump house is completely isolated or not. I can get a little sloppy with it. It's not going to be that big a deal. Okay. If it was, I would take the time to create a mask and isolate the pump house. For this example, I'm not going to bother. All right. So just so you're aware, you got to weigh what it is that you want to accomplish. All right. But I'm still going to need several images. Okay. Well, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to get my spot healing brush tool. And I'm going to come over here to these two people here, and I'm just going to get rid of them. All right. They don't do anything for the image. All right. And I don't want there to be a distraction. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go Control J. This is going to be our grass. Control J, That's going to be our trees. And Control J one more time. That's going to be the waterfall. Okay, everybody see that? Grass, trees, waterfall. All right, I'm going to turn off the visibility on those top three, and I'm just going to keep the grass. Okay. Now I have to make a decision. Excuse me. Previously, it was easy. It was straight onto the camera, horizontal, left to right. Here, we have a bit of an angle due to perspective, and we also have a hill. So we now have the topography of the land to keep in mind. So what I'm thinking is something that kind of follows this hillside, right? Something that follows that hillside. I got to change the color on my, you really can't see it, can you? Live draw. Give me a second. Let me change the color. Where's my blue? Oops. There we go. Okay. If we have the flow coming this way, it'll follow that hillside a little bit better. Make sense? Okay. So I'm going to come up here to filter, just like previously, blur, gallery, path blur. Okay. Opens up the dialog box. I'm going to take by default, it places that one in the middle. I'm going to take this end, put it at the top of the hill. Take this end, put it at the bottom of the hill. All right. And if you notice, there is a little dot in the center here. Okay. We can take that dot, and if we move it, we can curve that line. All right. And you can see how the blur kind of follows that line. That's the nice thing about this particular tool. All right. So I'm going to place one up there. I'm going to come down here. Right. And if you hover over the line right here, you're going to notice that the cursor changes to a little plus symbol that allows you to put another point. All right. And I'm going to take that and just create an S curve. All right. I'm going to do one over here. Click and drag to place my arrow, my initial arrow. Take that center point, bring it up. Click on the line to add another point. Drag it down. Okay. And I'm going to come back here and I'm just going to curve that just a little bit. Okay. All right. Now, mind you, I'm only concerned about the grass, so I don't care what the trees do. I don't care what anything else does. All right. I'm going to ramp up the speed. All right. And that looks pretty good. About 150%. Hit OK. Commits it. Voila. All right. My grass is done. Come up one layer. Okay, come up one layer to the trees. I'm going to make my trees active. Okay, now I'm going to repeat the process for the trees. Okay, this time I want to get creative. I'm going to go hog wild with this. All right, so filter, blur gallery, path blur. Okay. Again, opens up the dialog box. I'm going to take this and I'm going to place it on the left side of the pump house. I'm going to place this on the right side of the pump house. And I'm just going to kind of go up and over. Let's see, make this. All right, add another one here. There we go. and I want it to kind of curve up. All right, I'm going to add another arrow here. All right, I'm going to continue as if that arc, that line is going across, and I'm just going to go up and over. All right, so it creates this flow line. All right, everybody see the flow line, right? All right, I'm going to keep going. This time I'm going to go a little different. I'm going to go up. All right, and I'm going to create maybe a slightly different, okay. Oops. Bring that over. Okay. Make another one. And, oh, nope. I don't want to switch directions. Let's delete that one. I'm going to keep the same direction. Okay. And we're going to, let's change it up. Let's go really hog wild and just make this the direction of our whatchamacallit, of our flow really, really crazy. Everybody can see that, right? We'll just do one more. Add some points. Okay. So now we have this, you know, just craziness flowing across and taking all those colors and creating this really just wanky flow. All right. I'm going to bring up my speed. All right. Now, in this particular case, I'm not necessarily trying to keep the feel of trees. All right. I want this to be a very, very much a flow of colors. All right. So if I go up on the speed, all the better. Okay. Obviously, I don't want to go too much, you know, because it's going to be maybe a little bit too abstract. Okay. I need to find that balance between readability and abstract. Okay. So about 200%, that looks good. I'm going to hit OK to commit. Gonna give it a few seconds. Voila. Crazy, huh? All right. Last and final one. Bring that into view. And this one's just for the waterfall. And to be honest, I don't know if it even needs it, but you know what, we'll give it. Blur gallery, path blur. Oh, we can. There we go. Speed up. Give it a second to update. I'm really pushing my computer on this one because I got three blur effects going on here. All right, maybe push it up a little bit more. All right. Hit OK. All right, and that's our. Oh, I applied it to the wrong one. I applied it to the one underneath. All right. Always make sure. Don't do what I just said. Make sure you have your the layer that you want to work on. Make sure it's selected. Okay, let's try that again. Filter, blur gallery, path blur. There we go. Now it's looking like it should. There we go. Okay. Hit OK. Adds the blur effect. Perfect. I'm thinking it's like that wasn't looking right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hide my waterfall layer. I'm going to come back to our trees. Okay. And what I want to do is, again, I'm going to apply a mask, and I want to hide this effect from the underlying effect. Well, actually, you know what? Let's go down to the grass. We should start with the grass. My bad. Okay, we're gonna create a mask, holding down the Alt or Option key. I click on the mask. Nice big round brush. Soft round brush. White as my foreground color because we want to paint in the effect. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and put in this grass along the bottom. All right. If I get the waterfall, it doesn't matter because we're going to be painting in that waterfall anyway. Okay. All right. There's that one. I'm going to bring in the trees. Alt or Option, mask. I'm going to paint in these trees. All right. And I'm just going to avoid the pump house. All right. And like I said, it doesn't have to be super, super critical. All right. Because if the edges of the pump house are a little soft, not a big deal. Not a big deal. Okay. We can always come in, and if you see something that you don't like, all right, we can always shift to black as our foreground color. All right. And paint out the areas that we don't want. Okay. Size your brush accordingly, and then just paint in and paint out the areas that you don't want. Okay. X right at the top. Beautiful. All right. Oops. Don't want to get down into the grass here. Good. All right. We got our trees. We got our grass. What's next? Our waterfall. Alt, Option, create. Oops. I did it again. Make sure the layer is selected. Alt, Option, create a mask. Okay. We want to paint in white as our foreground color. We want to paint in our waterfall. Okay. Voila. Pretty psychedelic. Now we just bring Alan in, and here he is capturing this swirling mass of whatever. All right. And then from here, you can, play around with a little dodging and burning. I would probably, add a little bit of dodging down at the bottom just to kind of bring the eye up, and maybe add a little vignette, things like that. Okay. But that's how you can use the path tool to create, intentional camera movement, replicate it, and actually take it beyond what you can do with it. Okay. Any questions?
That was very cool. I'm looking at this. I go, all right. I got something to do tomorrow.
Cool.
It looks so easy when you do it.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Trust me, the hardest part is finding a photo to manipulate that is going to carry it across well. But, like I said, keep the tip in mind. Large areas of color, large areas of texture work best. Okay. All right. One last final one. Yes? No?
Go for it.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. this last one is going to take two images that I shot separately. All right, so in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to take something that actually has camera movement already baked into the image. Okay, so we're not going to be using the path tool for this. All right, we're just going to use the image on your right that has the eagle. Like I said, all I did is I just cranked the zoom in and out as I was pressing the shutter, and it gives you that kind of like really streaky effect. Okay. The lighting wasn't very good. I took this around 4:30-ish today, so it's just starting to get a little dark. All right, but I think if let me just up the exposure on that a little bit, you know, open up the shadows. Yeah, I think that should do it. Okay. All right. So for this, I'm going from Lightroom into Photoshop. Okay. So from Lightroom to Photoshop, I'm going to select the two images that I need. All right. I'm going to right click, and instead of just saying open in or edit in Adobe Photoshop, I'm going to come down to the bottom of that dialog box, okay, where it says open as layers in Photoshop, okay, open as layers in Photoshop. So how's that? Right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop, okay. And what that's going to do is it's going to open up both images. Give it a second. It's going to open up both images as individual layers in Photoshop. Okay. And as you can see, it's probably going to be like super, super easy. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I kind of want to line both these up. All right. So I'm going to take my top layer, all right, my top layer here, and I'm going to bring the opacity down so I can see the underlying layer underneath it. Okay. So if we zoom in, I want to find that point where we're starting to see that underlying one. Okay. All right, so that means that if I move that top layer, all right, it's going to allow me to see that underlying layer. And remember, the underlying layer has that blur effect, okay? But I want to kind of line these two up, all right? I purposely made sure that they were both kind of sort of about the same size, even though one has the blur effect. Okay, so I got the faces in the same spot. I'm going to go down here, check. The wings look like they're pretty good. All right, and then I'm just going to bring the opacity back up. Okay, so if I turn one off and on, you can see that they're kind of sort of in the same spot, right? Okay. Now, all I got to do is mask the bird. All right. So this is where it gets a little tricky. And this is a technique that I've shown in the past with like the multiplicity photos. All right. So typically, you know, like the previous example, what I did is I held the Alt or Option key, and then I created a negative mask. All right. And then if you take your brush with white as your foreground color, you just paint in the eagle. Okay. You can do that. All right. Sometimes it's not easy to see where it is you're painting. So sometimes it's easier to kind of like do it the other way around. Just create a regular mask. All right. I'm just going to zoom in here. All right. And then with black as my foreground color, I'm just going to blot out or mask out the bird. All right. So now what happens is as I paint, what I'm doing is I'm replacing the bird that's in sharp focus. I'm replacing it with the underlying blur bird. All right. But it doesn't matter because this is a temporary state. Okay. So I'm just going to hit the talons. All right. Increase my brush size. All right. And I don't need to go all the way up to the edge. As a matter of fact, if it has a little bit of a soft edge, it's great because the two will kind of meld into each other. All right. And I'm just going to just roughly paint in that bird, bring it up to the wing. All right. I'm going to size down a little bit, get those wing tips. All right. So now if we look at my mask, you can see that the mask isn't, all that great. All right. It's not all that great. I can go ahead and probably clean up a little bit here. Okay. But it doesn't have to be a fantastic mask. All right. That is definitely not a pretty mask. You'll agree with that, right? All right. So now, let me zoom back out. Now, all I have to do is invert the mask that I just created. So usually I just do that with Control I, Command I, and that inverts it, and voila. All right. So now all I got to do is just come into these areas here, up here. All right. Black as my foreground color, and I'm just going to paint out those rough areas there just to clean up that mask just ever so slightly along that edge. And yeah, maybe here. Look at that, huh? Okay. And maybe just come in and give that a crop. What do you think? Super simple. You can do that, right? Any questions?
Not a question, but it gives me an idea. I took a picture, you know what I'm talking about, at the north end of Huntington Plaza or Huntington Square there.
Mm-hmm.
The guy on the horse trying to stab the.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I think that's the name, but it's a neat little statue. And I
Yeah.
did a watercolor of that back in 2009.
Yeah, I have a picture of that very same statue somewhere in my collection. I think it's supposed to be St. George slaying the dragon.
Oh, okay.
Maybe? I don't know. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've seen it. But yeah. There you go. All right. And that's pretty much what I have for you guys today.
That was fabulous.
Yeah, thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Doc.
All right. So play around with actual intentional camera movement, out in the field, see what you can get. All right. Bring it in, match it with, an actual sharp image, merge the two together. And of course, I just showed you the merge. From here, you would, do your other edits, convert it to black and white, increase the texture, add your vignette, do, whatever else you do to it. Okay. So, and then if you don't have something with intentional camera movement, create your own. Use the path tool. All right. and go hog wild. All right. Post what you create on the Facebook page. I'd like to see them.
Okay. It kind of reminds me of when you were showing us the pen tool.
Yeah, a little bit.
The way you grab, yeah.
Yeah.
thing.
Yes. So those nodes, yes, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You just grab the
Yeah.
node and you move them around to create that spline any way you want. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Doc. Have a good night. Bye, everybody.
Good start to the year.
Awesome. Next Monday is Q&A. So if you have questions, send them to me. Either you can send them to me in advance or, the night of. Okay. Stay safe.
Okay.
And we'll catch you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.